My presentation entitled Ephemeral and Waiting, the Appreciation of Time and Place as Sources of Serendipity. Well, when Horace Walpole defined the word serendipity in 1754, our understanding of the world was very different from today. Nowadays, one of the more traditional definitions of it is the accidental yet beneficial discovery of something one was not looking for directly, and most of the times this definition plays an important role in scientific discoveries. Nevertheless, there doesn't appear to be a single agreed definition, as we can say it, of serendipity, but many definitions of it differing in those that assign more value to personal requirements or those that give more value to contextual factors. Thus, serendipity could be synonym with synchronicity, chance, luck, eureka, happy accidents, or novelty. In this sense, serendipity seems to be a complex phenomenon that, although it comes from outside the person, needs from her in order to be a transcendental life influence. Considering the aforementioned, what seems to link an integral understanding of serendipity is, on the one hand, the state of the context, namely temporal and environmental factors, and on the other hand, the value given to human agency. Turning first to the state of the context, sorry, this is the other one. Okay. Turning first to the state of the context, I like Morley and Aron's suggestion when they state that the idea of serendipity appeals very strongly to identify it as a magic moment. This connection with magic implies that serendipity is something that would appear arbitrarily without an apparent cause, so it wouldn't be neither an effect. In this sense, I agree also with Listman, Mancri, and Blandford that the sense of serendipity is closely related to that of synchronicity. As I said, defining serendipity is a complicated issue, so I will refer to synchronicity bringing to the limelight the idea of serendipity. Synchronicity, as was coined by Carl Gustav Jung, to refer instances of meaningful coincidence, as well as indicators of a causal connective principle, namely the low probability intersection of two or more events. Well, now focusing on the second part, the value given to human agency, I think the idea of weird coincidence developed by Stephanie Coleman, Bernard Beitman, and Elif Selebai, because I think it's very sharp in this regard. Here, the so-called magic moment becomes transcendental for a person because it is like a narrow window for human agency. Furthermore, the unexpected nature of this weird experience is capable of generating a certain degree of emotion, and with it, the search for this possible meaning. Well, if we broaden all these characteristics as the basis for unexpected encounters, such as serendipity, we can see a pattern. The intersection of events occurs fortuitously rather than through a deliberate subject's plan, but its appearance is meaningful to him. So it becomes clear that the main basis for unexpected encounters is the intrinsic relationship between subject or human agency and context. This intrinsic relationship between context and the natural factor and human agency, the human factor, is extensively exposed by Charles Sanders Peirce through the concept of chance. For the philosopher, just as the laws of nature are occasionally violated by a novel event that offers the possibility of adaptation, the human mind is also occasionally redirected by unexpected chances. In this sense, chance must play a vital role in any theory of the human knowledge and the growth of the natural world. In addition to synchronicity, serendipity also shares fundamental elements with chance. John K, for its part, indicates that for ancient Greeks, chance or tché was the belief that one's orientation to chance and possibility could affect the ways in which individuals flourish and mature in their everyday lives. The relationship between human flourishing and chance is better exposed by the philosopher Ella Lyman Cabot, because for her, chance is beneficial because it is inextricably linked to the possibility of human creativity, beginning the region where human purposes arise and grow. Therefore, chance in these terms accurately expresses the characteristics of freedom and spontaneity, but also of agency and responsibility, making explicit the opportunity for human creativity. Taking all the above into account and trying to define the intention of my proposal, I consider that the definition that Macri and Blandford give to serendipity is very comprehensive in this sense, because they assume subconscious, the use of information, and the idea of latency. Accordingly, it seems that at the time of its appearance, the part played by serendipity is normally considered secondary, but as time passes, its fundamental importance in defining the future is revealed. So, for this reason, there is a lot of research on what elements the subject needs to be prepared for serendipitous encounters, but there are much less that analyze what serendipity needs to manifest itself. We could agree that this last question has to be linked to the first one in order to really have a cognitive impact on the person. So both questions are of equal importance for me. With this in mind, my purpose is to develop both issues as a dependent and necessary relationship between subject and context. When potential serendipity is encountered, a necessary skill is the ability to recognize it. We could agree in that. At this point, the first question that many experiments start from is, what does the subject require to recognize serendipity? But for me, this could be not the right question or the first right question, because to answer this, we must first ask ourselves why serendipity becomes manifest to that particular person. And I think that the answer to both questions will be due to time. This is why I mean when I mention the intrinsic relationship between subject and context. Serendipity is not a moment in time or the mere presentism in time without future. On the contrary, it is the passage of time and its resonance in the life of the individual. As the passage of time, serendipity is related to what in the Baroque, for example, was understood as occasion. Through an appreciation of ephemeral life, the present can be captured as an opportune moment. In this sense, it is important to mention how some of the most popular requirements for serendipity encounters, according to many investigations, could be counterproductive if we don't attend to the relevance of time. I want to highlight three of the most popular ones: a rich exposure to information, the promotion of pleasant experiences, and design or predesigned spaces. For the first one, many scholars have made experimental observations of the alienating effects of the excess of information in media. According to them, the daily, constant, and accelerated information that we all receive in globalized societies can never be adequately digested, absorbed, nor incorporated as part of one's own experience. So this problem, however, is not new. Since 1754, the poet Samuel Johnson indicates that there is a tendency for an individual to lose himself in the crowd, filling the vacuities of his mind with the news of the day. We also have to bear in mind another important thing. Currently, our sources of information can be physical or digital. In both of them, if there is no time to think about on what we are consuming, namely receiving, registering, the constant exposure to information becomes a mindless passive occupation. Nevertheless, physical sources of information could trigger serendipity encounters easier than digital ones. The reason could be that the former has more levels of freedom and less exposure to constant data. Perhaps that is why in many experiments, people report that the physical context favors serendipity encounters better than digital ones. For example, according to the research results of Boger and Jornborn, the most ranked activities in Twitter for having serendipity encounters are the physical ones. People face-to-face, by phone, reading, transportation, travel, and nature appears 30 times. On the other hand, the most ranked digital activities were blogs, chats, podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, etc., but they appear 10 times less than the former. So there is one major problem for me with digital environments, that waiting time, namely time for thinking about what we are receiving and registering, is almost not existent, in contrast to physical environments. I insist that it is important to allow time to process and digest the unexpected. Furthermore, it is no longer news that the movement to the web is predetermined. That is, if I buy a book on Amazon, if I listen to a song on YouTube, if I follow a Twitter account, the design of those platforms that try to predict my profile in order to give me more books, songs, or accounts that sympathize with my tastes or opinions. In this context, it is legit to ask if this is really an environment for unexpected encounters. Maybe sometimes. Thus, technology can certainly contribute to efficiency, but it leaves little chance or serendipity. Indeed, this policy of excessive efficiency, which emphasizes on fast results and output qualifications, has spread to almost all facets of life. In this respect, Eckerstone, for example, refers that specifically in academia, this policy of acceleration means that papers' content seems less interesting than their number. This accelerated and predetermined way of doing things could serendipity undermine the emergence of unexpected encounters. For this, in this sense, for the philosopher Ella Lyman Cabot, it is not the consumption of novelties that it is important, but the imaginative use we make of them. This is why time is an imperative basis for redirecting passive consumption towards active imagination. Consequently, mere receptivity and data recording are not enough if the message is not processed. Therefore, the more rushed, accelerated, or preconditioned the consumption of the information is, the more difficult serendipity will be. Only with enough waiting time, the subject will have the ability to recognize the potentially valuable found by chance. If a person doesn't take the time to be sufficiently aware of the context, the message goes unnoticed regardless of its potential value. Therefore, according to Joseph Solomon, for example, timing and context are crucial for accidental acquisition. That is, the cognitive necessary process to notice serendipity. In this regard, it is important to mention the relevance of the veiled information, namely the latent information that belongs to the unconscious. I want to stop here in order to better develop the concept of latency, because I suggest it is the latent information and not the manifest one that truly composes serendipity encounters. From the Greek latere, the latent refers to the remnants of the past that belong to the present and their powers of reactivation. The value of latent from this definition, it is that it guarantees a space to play with different possibilities that can be updated according to experience. That is to say, latency becomes imperative because it allows the temporal unity, which in turn allows individual to unfold narrativity. In other words, the search for information is gated by a complex process of interest and gaps. The former is definitely followed by a conscious decision, but since the second remains latent, it is found in the unconscious. From this perspective, I agree with Marchignoni and Heinstrom that fortuitous encounter involve less cognitive load but require more attention. As I mentioned, the crucial prerequisite for attention in this globalized context of accelerated relationship is definitely time. Time to think, time to imagine, to develop. The second most popular requisite for serendipity encounters that I want to highlight is the promotion of pleasant experiences. The unusual is promptly dismissed because its appearance doesn't depend merely on the subject's agency and could trigger something unpleasant. So it is quite natural to find comfortable security and serenity in a set of places that have been satisfactorily prearranged. Thus, thinking of serendipity as a chance that manifests itself only through pleasant experiences removes its link with the environment, giving it a sense of timelessness. According to W.B. Cannon, we have to recognize the serendipity encounters as an extension of the world, not settled nor immobilized, but as a presenting all kinds of possibilities for novel and unprecedented combination and readjustments, maybe comfortable or maybe not. In this sense, Cabot wonders if it is not the starting point of invention, the imperfect, the chaotic, the disorderly, rather than the exclusively the deliberate and the finite. This is why Van Andel defines serendipity as a successful error. Therefore, the whole spectrum of different degrees, ranging from pleasant to fun, for me, doesn't meet the definition given by Walpole in his description of serendipity. It should be noted that according to the story, the camel owner accused the princess of having stolen his camel and formally charged them into the emperor's court. And it is also important not to forget that penicillin was a spoiled experiment. Therefore, serendipity doesn't have to be a happy, pleasant, or positive experience at first glance, since it unfolds over time. It is both an experimental and aesthetic experience too, demonstrating that we can also find wisdom in the unpleasant. As an extension of environment of the natural world, serendipity provides friction to the subject, including constraints and obstacles, helping us stumble upon potentially interesting sources, as Gordon says. This kind of irregular environment invites us to slow down, to stop, to look closer. In this sense, W.B. Cannon states that in scientific investigation, as in daily living, obstacles may yield important values. This is the main purpose of the dictum, change favors the mind that is prepared. Wisdom can be found in any kind of experience or context. In this sense, it is very illustrative what Cabot states in this regard. We do not see that in the ruffling caused by the interruption may be our opportunity. Considering serendipity could be a happy accident, but also a successful error, it is imperative to ask ourselves how tolerant we are in the face of mistake, fault, or distraction. At this point, the second most popular requirement for serendipity is related to the third one that I want to highlight, predesigned spaces. In this society of constant productivity, if we do not constantly improve ourselves, we are inefficient because we are wasting time. This positivistic perspective of time could explain why in recent years many experiments propose how one can design, accelerate, program, engineer, maximize, improve plant serendipity. I agree with Van Adel when he states that designing for serendipity is an oxymoron. Serendipity per se cannot be engineered. I insist, thinking about serendipity as a moment in time that could be designed is to think of it from a positivistic and timelessness perspective. Many researchers have pointed out that serendipity is a highly subjective and situational phenomenon woven in time. As Boydron states, we cannot design environments always leading to serendipity. Serendipity must be encountered in unplanned ways in order to be serendipitous. It's all of time, is all in the time, is flexible, fleeting. We have to recognize this feature of serendipity as something necessary and that it goes beyond human planification, because even if we try to design for serendipity, no one can predict the moment of its arrival because it is something contingent. In this regard, Leonard Boydron states that serendipity may happen in environments with incomplete, inconsistent, and unfinalizable features that leave potentials open to us. The incompleteness of an environment includes imperfect cracks and affordances for the users. Cabot, for its part, writes that contingency ability to affect habitual purposes is due primarily to the fact that looseness and indefiniteness of any plan, which may be considered a lack, is the center of radiating opportunity, a space for change. More specifically, it creates a clearing for my chance, a personal and meaningful opportunity for creative engagement. In sum, even if our context is predesigned to be rich in information and promote pleasant experiences, if we don't attend to how important the appreciation of time is, we will not be able to become aware of serendipity encounters. Thus, my proposal focuses on the value of time for serendipitous encounters, specifically in the appreciation of the ephemeral in everyday life. Because in the course of our human experiences, no one can say what new fleeting circumstances may arise. The unexpected is continually happening in our lives. If we do not appreciate the ephemeral, namely the changes in our usual routine, we may not be alert enough to see the cracks, the lacks of it. So we could miss the opportunity that chance provides. As Kant states, the ubiquity of opportunity is because of change. However, change is what happens most often during the day. Everything changes, Heraclitus said. So this incessant change is covered up either by the common habit of ignoring it, or by the sense of seeming chaotic cracks being avoided. In any case, fleeting time tends to be perceived as a void or a hole, and certainly could be, but as the Ron claims, the important thing is to see bridges where others saw holes. This is why I consider it very important to revalue the ephemeral. Appreciating the ephemeral, or how the passage of times allows change, opens the door for the imagination, and it is the imagination that allows one to take a turn in thought. In Cabot's words, the matter of literal imagination may plod along doing about what is unexpected of him. Thousands of iridescent opportunities open for a moment like a rainbow before him, but he sees only the dust in the road. For this wanderer, the road of life is characterized by odd, but all too familiar mix of drudgery and anxiety. Things appear on this road in one of two unsatisfactory ways, as pattern and boring landscape, or as disjoint and chaotic terrain. So using imagination in this apparently vacuous incessant flux of time is to creatively recombine events based on the appearance of a meaningful rather than a causal link. That is, to create a meaningful narrative for the subject according to his or her past experiences. For McDarrow, the tale is instructive precisely because the princes relate on creativity in recombining events and also practical judgment to deduce correct pairs of events as to generate a surprising effective plot, that is, a narrative. It is important to understand this because it demonstrates why serendipity is closely related to time, since it goes beyond being a specific moment, being above all a process of time to create a narrative. Being a time process, serendipity allows reflection and therefore consciousness. As we said, we become aware of serendipity once it has passed, not while it occurs, because serendipitous encounters is above all unconscious. Serendipity means a hindsight recognition. In this sense, serendipity could actually give sense to moral responsibility. It is well known that human actions are defined not only from reason, but also from expressive involvement. It is due to the ability to project to the world certain qualities of one's own actions that reflect intentionality, as well as the evaluation of that intentionality. Expressive implication, therefore, it is but the way we narrate a story. It becomes clear why time is so important in serendipitous encounters, because through it, we can appreciate changes by being attentive to the world. We can use our imagination developing a story to fill the gaps. And finally, we can consciously give the world a certain intentionality. Thank you very much.